Let the word go forth.
Fool me once.
Are you fired up?
I'm not a crook.
Are you ready to go?
Shame on you.
It's Abe Lincoln's Top Hat, hosted by Ben Kissel.
Fool me, can't get fooled again.
Hey, what's up, everyone? How are you? Ben Kissel here with Marcus Parks. My goodness. Well, first of all, we have to do the sad news. John McCain passed away.
Yeah.
81 years old. Really devastating. Welcome to the show, by the way, everyone. John McCain passed away, 81 years old. Really, I mean, the last great spokesperson, the one to reach across the aisle. It doesn't happen anymore, so that was really sad. And it was difficult to watch the family's reaction at the funeral. It was like heartbreaking, almost to the point where I was like, I felt kind of weird watching the footage because it was so hyper-personal.
I had to stop watching it because it felt wrong.
Yes.
I don't like watching public funerals.
No, it's
very
so
strange.
sad, especially when it's like, I don't know, especially when we have a connection. Obviously, you know, I got to meet Megan. I did her radio show multiple times. She was the first one to call me a political commentator.
Ooh.
And I said, I've been called a political commentator by a senator's daughter. I'm going to Fox News immediately. But she was so sweet to me. And evidently, Mr. McCain listened when I was on the radio. I think he listened to all of her shows.
Yeah.
And he said he really enjoyed me, and that made me feel good.
Oh, I remember
that. Was
that.
nice.
Yeah, and I also enjoy Meghan McCain as well as a political commentator.
Absolutely. She's out there fighting on The View, and that show, I don't even know how you do that every day. It's got to be difficult for all of them, but they are yelling at each other, and I don't know if it's productive or not, but I guess it's entertaining.
Yeah.
Of course, John McCain, a small political scandal in 1989. He was part of the Keating Five. Mm-hmm. That was a savings and loan scandal. During the savings and loans, it was a big crisis at the time, so they got wrapped up. This guy Keating, he had a savings and loan. I think it was called Lincoln Savings and Loan, something like that. Anyway, basically it was a pay-to-play type situation. That was the biggest scandal of his career, and then he went on to work with my senator from Wisconsin, Russ Feingold, and created the McCain-Feingold bill to try to curb a little bit of the financial or the money influence in politics. Dare I say it didn't work, but nonetheless, he admitted his faults when he had the faults, and I think he did try to do what was best for the country as he saw it. And I firmly believe if he was not completely screwed over by Karl Rove and the Bush machine in 2000, after 9/11, the worst thing that ever happened to this country, I think John McCain would have been a much, much better president than George W. Bush. I know he was a hawk, but he was rational. He wouldn't have surrounded himself with Rumsfeld, Cheney, Ashcroft, these really faux patriots, people who were just, they hug the flag like Donald Trump, and they're just pretending like they're strong men by sending young people off to wars that aren't necessarily needed nor valid. I don't think we would have gone into Iraq if John McCain
we would not
president.
have gone into Iraq at all.
I think it's fair to say we would have been in a war, but I don't think we would have gone into Iraq. So rest in peace, Mr. McCain, 81 years old. His mother is 106, still alive.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And she looks fine.
She's fine. She's doing great. So, yes, that was a big story this week. And, of course, Donald Trump just Donald Trump. He refused to lower the flags at the White House initially. Fox News ran a story. It was negative. The flags went down.
Yeah.
He kept them up, or he only lowered them briefly and then raised them again. Then he would put them down. His statement on Twitter was horrible. It was just, didn't even thank John McCain for his service. 5 years in the Hanoi Hilton. There's a great documentary on John McCain, by the way. If you get a chance to watch it, it's on HBO. I really didn't realize the extent of the torture and the abuse they all went through, and they talked to some of the folks that he was held with, and the amount of respect that they had for John was really something that you could feel through the television screen. And I would have tapped out immediately. Yeah. I would have, whatever they want to hear, if someone even looks at me and they have a pair of scissors and they're like, I will be like, what do you need to know? And they'll be like, I'm a seamstress. I'm like, whatever, I will tell you anything. So the fact that he stayed there for 5 years when he could have been released, because obviously his father was a very successful admiral and a very well-known internationally, obviously a long line of military achievement in his family. So that was sad news, and a little bit, I guess, not unexpected. No. He had been fairly quick. He lived longer than his diagnosis. They said he was going to live around 6 months, and he lived longer than that. Brain cancer ended up taking Senator John McCain. And it's kind of sad, specifically given just the tone of Washington, D.C. today. Where is the young John McCain? We don't know. Speaking of tone, we had a primary was specifically Florida. Let's focus on Florida a little bit. We can talk a little bit about Arizona as well. McSally was able to beat Kelly Ward and our favorite guy, Joe Arpaio. These two Ward and Arpaio are true Looney Tunes. Obviously, we know a lot about Arpaio. Had to be pardoned by Donald Trump for disobeying a court order, and he was charged with a felony for crying out loud. This man then thought he should be a senator for some reason. Kelly Ward is almost crazier than Joe Arpaio in a sense. She was almost more Trump than Trump. Yeah. So they were running in the Republican primary against this gal McSally. McSally was the first female to ever, I believe, she was a pilot. She was the first one to ever fly in active duty, I believe. And so she had a great resume. She was able to win. Honestly, the Republican Party dodged a massive bullet because the Democratic opponent, no doubt, was pushing for someone like Arpaio or Ward because I think she would have been able to increase her chances of winning significantly. But now McSally is there, so who knows? It tends to be a Republican-held seat, so we'll see what happens there. Also in Florida, DeSantis, he is another Trump lackey. He was able to win the primary for governor, and he was going against this guy, Gilliam. And now Gilliam is an African-American man. He got 34% of the vote. It was a real surprise victory. And immediately, DeSantis is speaking about how we don't want to elect this Democrat because he's going to monkey up the works. This is the term that he used. Obviously, a lot of people were like, was that a dog whistle or whatever it is? So that is already beginning when it comes to the underlying racial tone, tenor of that race. I'm sure it'll be there throughout the cycle.
Well, that guy also, he has ties to the alt-right as well. So
absolutely.
He's not, he's definitely not, we're not talking about a Boy Scout here at all.
He might be a Boy Scout, to be fair. Everyone's like, oh, we're not talking about a Boy Scout, but there's a lot of horrible Boy Scouts. All right, so that's basically, those were the two biggest primaries, the two biggest races that we were watching this past week. And of course, the primary season continues on. And November is coming right around the corner. And someone is happy for November not to come. And that person is, of course, Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Donald Trump has said this week that he's not going to fire Jeff Sessions until probably after the elections in November. So his time is limited. Folks like Lindsey Graham, obviously someone who has managed to square his love of Senator John McCain and his ability to deal with Donald Trump. He somehow can square that in his head. I think in his mind, he is doing it for the American people. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lindsey Graham.
Thank you so much for doing that for the American people. But he has been talking a lot about how Jeff Sessions, publicly, he has been talking about how Jeff Sessions should probably step down at this point. It's not a relationship that seems to be working. They don't like each other, and I guess you really can't have a relationship with the president and the attorney general despising one another to the degree that they despise one another. It is intense, to say the least.
It is.
And of course, we also had the situation where Donald Trump was speaking in Indiana. We have, as we talked about last week, all the guilty verdicts. Manafort is now, he's got his second trial coming up in D.C. He wants to get that moved. It's possible he's going to try to seek a plea deal for the second trial. Too little, too late, perhaps. Who knows? So we will have to wait and see what goes on there. Trump in Indiana yesterday. I was watching C-SPAN. There's 3 C-SPANs,
Really?
Yeah, pretty exciting stuff. And I know. Just when you can't get enough of one, then you got 2 more, just in case. I do love C-SPAN. John Meacham was on there talking. He's a presidential historian. He had some pretty good jabs. He had some good barbs.
Bet he did. And
occasionally he was in roast mode. But Donald Trump speaking in Indiana, if you get a chance, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, just watch them. And it really gives you an understanding of what the hell is going on. Interesting. There was one point, and you will always find a point, for the most part, where you say, I can kind of get on board when he talks about prisoners.
Yeah.
Donald Trump talking about prisoners is actually really interesting because he talks about how he wants to get them back to work. Of course, we also have to look at the criminal justice system. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is a massive proponent of over-incarceration, private prison systems, all that stuff. So the rhetoric doesn't match the policy, to say the least. But nonetheless.
Yeah. And don't forget Jeff Sessions owns stock in many private prison companies.
Civic Geo Group, all those things. But that is a time where Donald Trump does talk about prisoners in a way that I haven't seen any president talk about them, really kind of passionately. And so that was one of the components of the speech that I thought was interesting. But then we have the immigration portion of his speech. It is increasingly hostile. And I know that's kind of crazy to say because it started out with calling them rapists. It's gotten even more hostile when it comes to immigrants. MS-13 is now representative to the minds of many Trump supporters. And this is what Donald Trump is trying to do. Paint all immigrants with the MS-13 paintbrush.
Yep.
So when you say MS-13, we're not talking about a specific group of gang members that are horrible. Absolutely, they kill, they murder, they do everything bad under the sun. No one is denying that, but the way that he uses this rhetoric is quite fascinating. Now he is telling a story about how women walk home, they get sliced, they get diced, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure these things happen. They happen all across the board, amongst all economic groups, amongst all racial classes. Murder happens.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he talks about how ICE goes into these neighborhoods. I say it's a war. I think it's a war now. And I say the neighbors, they see ICE. They go out the windows and they wave at ICE. They say thank you. And now, you know what they're doing? They're liberating these neighborhoods. They're liberating the neighborhoods. That's the language he's using now, that he is liberating neighborhoods. And then he says, I like ICE. I say grab him by the neck, throw him in the back of the paddy wagon. And everyone just goes crazy. So he is really ratcheting it up, this anti-immigrant rhetoric, in a way that is just, I mean, I hate the analogy, but my goodness, this is the late 1930s, without a doubt, coming right here in 2018 to America. I mean, the way that he talks about liberating these neighborhoods, quite fascinating.
It's giving them an enemy.
It's definitely giving them an enemy.
It's focusing them on that. Well, that's what he's all about, and especially look, this speech. This speech is very much about focusing an enemy, because this is a quote, him talking about the media. He said, today's Democrat Party is held hostage by left-wing haters. Angry haters. That's great.
Haters.
Angry mobs. I love it when the president talks like a fucking 13-year-old girl on
like Taylor
Instagram.
Swift.
Yeah. Angry mobs, deep state radicals, establishment cronies, and their fake news allies. Our biggest obstacle and their greatest ally actually is the media.
It is interesting, and these people are frothing at the mouth.
Interesting. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's also interesting. I would say.
I mean, those two things are not mutually exclusive. Yes.
But the people, it gets them so riled up. And as a fan of professional wrestling, my God, does he just understand?
He just does it.
How to be the heel, but then he's also a face to these people. So
he's our heel. He's their face.
Oh my God! And he calls it a revolution now. It's interesting to say the least. If you get a chance, again, watch these full speeches. I know it's hard. As soon as people hear his voice, you just get upset.
You just want to change the channel. You don't want to hear
really
it.
Do.
I do not. I actually prefer to read his speeches now instead of actually watching them, because it's just that his voice does. I mean, it makes me sad.
It is
and
sad.
Especially these his voice actually makes me sad, and especially to watch these rallies and to see these people swallowing this bullshit, loving it, hook, line, and sinker.
He gives them everything they want. He walks out to proud to be an American.
Yeah,
he's got 2 green hats in his hands.
Yeah, because every other musician in America has said, "Stop playing my fucking music."
Well, except for he still plays the Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want.
Ugh.
That's the end. He's done that ever since the beginning. It's really bizarre that that's the song he chooses. I suppose that's how he sees himself. He's not the. A lot of people say he's not the perfect messenger, but he's getting the job done. So I suppose maybe it's a harken back to that sentiment. Comes out on stage, 2 green hats, walks around. I mean, this crowd is amped up. Again, it is a WWE Monday Night Raw or Tuesday Night SmackDown. Ends up throwing the caps into the audience. Just fascinating to see this, the theatrics behind this man. And that's where he is he's in a little womb. He is safe and he is sound. And that's where he is just absolutely doing wonderful, despite the fact that, as we will see here in the fairly near coming future, what's going to happen with the trade policies that he is enacting. So now he wants to renegotiate NAFTA. So he's speaking with the Mexican president, speaking with Mexican leaders. Automakers are quite upset or worried about what the hell does that mean.
Yeah.
NAFTA, of course, the North American Free Trade Agreement, been around for a little while. And you could argue it's led to more economic success than any other trade agreement that we have. It's pretty crucial to our economy. The industry, this is according to a New York Times article. Automakers, I guess they're getting some clarity on what the hell this is going to mean. The industry awaits details of the preliminary agreement that President Trump and Mexican leaders announced this week, but analysts say that most companies will be able to comply with the conditions that have been disclosed. The preliminary deal would require companies to produce at least 75% of automobiles measured by value in North America to import cars into the U.S. duty-free, as tax-free. That's up from 62.5% under the North American Free Trade Agreement. Automakers would also have to use more local steel, aluminum, glass, and other parts. Of course, that is also going to, the steel tariffs and the aluminum tariffs are going to have a really significant role. If we have to create more here, it's going to really jack up a lot of prices. And what's going to end up happening is the consumer is going to end up paying more. And of course, the theory is that more people are going to have jobs. They're going to have more money in their wallets, more money in their checking account. So they're going to be able to afford a little bit more. But the reality is automation is king. And when we talk about building new factories, we talk about these things coming to the United States as if they're going to be huge job makers. It's going to be robots. Mm-hmm. And you know I hate the robots. But those are going to be the people who have these jobs. So the increase in actual jobs is not going to be near what people are predicting or what Donald Trump is saying. Analysts are predicting, obviously, the way it works now with automation, the jobs won't be quite as high. So he's renegotiating that. There's a lot of stuff going on. He is a busy, busy man.
And it's not just that. As far as not contributing to the economy goes, he also put the kibosh on the federal employee pay raise.
Yeah. You know what? Is that meter maids?
But the thing about this is that it wasn't necessarily a raise. It was a cost of living raise. It was to keep up with inflation. It was only a 2% raise, but in effect, this is a pay cut because inflation is expected to increase next year, and this pay raise was supposed to keep in line with that. But, this isn't really much of a surprise because our pay has not matched inflation in decades.
Absolutely not.
It absolutely
That's why
has
you're making
not.
less now than you were back in the day.
Making much less now.
All right. So a little bit later on here in this episode, I have an interview with Mark Jacobson. He is an author of a new book. It's coming out. It's all about William Bill, a.k.a. Bill Cooper. Marcus, you're going to love this book.
Oh, yeah.
The name of the book is Pale Horse Rider, William Cooper, The Rise of Conspiracy and the Fall of Trust in America. So stay tuned for that interview with Mr. Mark Jacobson. But let's get to the biggest news story of the week, Alex Jones. So this happened this week. Marcus just turned me on to this story. Now, what happened here, Marcus?
Here's what happened. So Alex Jones, he's doing his program, and something's not working with his big screen. Mm-hmm. So he pulls out his phone to put it up to the camera and to
show people the documents.
Yeah, this is what it is. It's just go ahead, let's just show it here.
Okay.
And then there were a bunch of tabs open.
Okay.
On his phone, and one of the tabs you could just see a title.
Okay.
The title was what you saw was Naughty T-Babe Marissa Meh.
Ooh, okay. Naughty T-Babe.
Naughty T-Babe Marissa Meh.
Maybe she's British.
And so someone typed it in, just very much typed it in.
Oh, he's got a lot of researchers who watch his show, a lot of internet sleuths.
Yeah, someone checked it out. And what it was is that it was a Pornhub link.
Okay.
To Naughty T-Babe Marissa Minx, who is described as Australia's #1 trans companion / XXX adult model.
Transgender sex worker. All right. And Alex Jones is all man, though. I thought that he was against transgender.
All man, all man, totally against transgender people, but it seems like Alex Jones might be enjoying it a little bit.
Interesting.
So everyone's been waiting for, he didn't say anything, of course it's out there. Everyone's been talking about it. Everyone has been.
I was just watching it to, man. I just was watching it to, she's a man. I was watching it to find, I was finding the evidence. I saw the face and I said, it's got to be a man. And, anyway, I just watched it for 5 to 7 minutes every day for a couple of months about that.
Well, so he hasn't. He didn't say anything. He didn't release any statement. But
I also don't necessarily know if you have to release a statement. Okay, this is this world that he created.
Didn't address it.
Okay,
yeah, but this is the world he created. He did create a place where trans people are not necessarily welcome.
Oh, absolutely. Of course. Let's not forget going back when it came to the transgender ban in the military. Absolutely atrocious. That's when we started this administration.
Yeah,
doesn't that seem
like a long
time ago? Good Lord. Lord.
Yeah. So Alex Jones was doing his show, taking a live caller, and let's listen to the audio.
All right, let me look at this guy. I haven't seen him in a little while.
Yeah, right.
I got to tell you, though, it's neck and neck, though. If people don't get upset about this, they could win.
Yeah. And also, what about the trans porn on your phone, Alex? Or you were going to talk about that?
Say that again?
Trans porn on your phone? That's all they keep talking about.
Shaking his head.
You know, I saw a couple news articles about that. It's ridiculous. I was
You
like
gotta
looking
watch
up
this
some
on YouTube,
reporter we're
folks.
trying to hire today and punched in some number, and it popped up porn on my phone. Everybody's had porn pop up on their phones hundreds of times. So I'm sitting there with a phone on air showing it to everybody because I couldn't get a URL up in the studio. And then like some thing pops up and like, oh my God. And I looked at it. It wasn't the news blurted out because there was nothing there. They blurred it to then say something was there. Then you went to it. It was some porn menu. I probably had porn menus pop up 500 times on my phone. So I appreciate your call. I mean, it's insane, ladies and gentlemen. There's two types of people that look at porn and people that lie about it. But I wasn't looking at porn on my phone. I don't take phones on air that I look at porn on. And so I saw all that. I didn't respond to it. I mean, if I respond to half the attacks on me, but then they ridiculous. But I'll say this. The Amazon ads, the Viagra ads, the weird non-plastic bag ads are taking my iPhone over. iPhones didn't used to be that bad like Androids. It's
I was watching it, but the weird non-plastic bag ads. It's paper. It's paper bags.
Let's unpack this just very briefly.
Interesting.
But, first of all, I have never, ever had porn just pop up on my phone.
No, it doesn't just pop up. He also, it's just amazing. He's like, I'm just popping in some numbers. Next thing you know, I got some porn up.
Numbers?
I don't know what numbers he's popping in.
And also like, well, I don't bring phones on air that I look at porn on. And so he has a separate phone for porn.
A porno phone, which then you really have to wonder what the hell he's looking at.
You really gotta wonder. He is so flustered and embarrassed.
It's interesting. It's not even a big deal.
It's not a big deal
It's
at all.
Alex Jones, who is just, we all know who Alex Jones is.
Yeah, of course it's not a big deal at all.
I gotta say, he is thinner than he used to be. He looks haggard. I think now he is in the middle of that really significant trial that could bankrupt him.
It really could.
Of course, the folks there, the Sandy Hook parents who were tormented by his fans, forced to move out of their homes after they lost their children.
7 times they had to move.
7 times. Unbelievable. So my sympathy for him is non-existent. I have more sympathy for Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
I really do. In a strange
He's
way.
a war criminal.
Yeah, I mean, that's classy stuff. That's old school, all right, everyone. Well, thank y'all so much for listening. Enjoy this interview with Mark Jacobson. All right, well, I am honored now to be here with Mark Jacobson. He is the author of Pale Horse Rider, William Cooper, The Rise of Conspiracy, and the Fall of Trust in America. Thanks for being here, Mark.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you invited me over.
So we did a Patreon interview for Last Podcast on the Left. Thank you so much for doing that. And we talked a lot about Bill Cooper, the life of Bill Cooper. Of course, for those that don't know, and I'm sure everyone does know, he was sort of the first conspiracy theorist to really gets somewhat mainstreamed, and he was on the frontier of what's now known as conspiracy thought, the Alex Jones kind of pseudo-intellectuals. He was sort of the grandfather of that movement, right?
Well, I don't know if you want to call a guy who lives on top of a mountain in the middle of rural Arizona with a studio which is probably very similar to the studio we're sitting in here now. Mainstream, if you want to call him mainstream, go right ahead. But
well, by today's standards, his sort of conspiracy theory thinking has become mainstreamed, hasn't it?
Well, but his delivery system was different in the sense that he was only on shortwave radio.
Right.
So the thing about shortwave radio, which I always thought was great, was if you're sitting there and you're waiting to hear Bill Cooper, and there's a sunspot like 93 million miles away, you're not going to hear him.
What is this old technology? I'm completely confused.
I'm not an expert on it, but shortwave radio was that was the delivery system of most of this pre-Rush Limbaugh kind of stuff.
Well, that's great, and I'm happy that you mentioned that because that's what I came here to talk to you about, shortwave radio. That's all I want to talk about for the next 45 minutes.
Well, actually, there's a great The hero of shortwave radio was actually a New York guy named Alan Weiner, which anybody that is in this business, including yourself,
all right,
should know about Alan Weiner.
All right.
Because Alan Weiner he's the original radio pirate guy.
All right, I'll check him out.
He got a boat. He had a boat, I think it was called the USS, it was a Japanese trawler. They caught illegal Japanese fishing or whatever they do.
Right.
And he bought this boat and he anchored it about 6 miles off of Jones Beach.
Okay.
Just beyond the 6 mile, whatever it is, 6 mile or 2 mile limit. I don't know.
All right.
But and he started to broadcast against all.
There was a movie, Pirate Radio, made about this.
Yeah, but he's the real guy.
All right, he's the Mr. Alan Weiner. I'll look into
he's
it.
Still got a radio station, WBCQ, which is right on the Canadian border in Maine.
All right,
called Monticello, Maine, and he is the guy, and he's a hero of a sort.
Well, I'll have an interview with Alan Weiner whenever I possibly can. Whenever I get out to sea, I'll go and try to find him and speak to him. Also, you have a book reading for your most recent book. Again, that is A Pale Horse Rider, William Cooper, The Rise of Conspiracy and the Fall of Trust in America. You're going to be at the Strand on September 6th from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m.
That's true.
So check that out, folks. The Strand, it's a very exciting place. There's a lot of books, and who doesn't love books?
They say they have 8 miles of books.
Yes. Don't love them as much as the kid did from the movie Happiness. Other than that, you're allowed to go peruse as many books as you'd like and listen to Mr. Jacobson. But I want to talk about fake news.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the world that we're living in right now because it seems more difficult to see to tell what's true, what's false. Everyone sort of just puts the news, they digest the news that they want to digest that fits their political narrative. How has news changed from your experience in working with Esquire and just your life experience? How have you seen it change throughout your time in journalism?
Well, I've been a working journalist since 1972.
Okay.
Strangely enough. And I worked for, everywhere. Rolling Stone. I was a contributing editor there for years. And I worked at New York Magazine. My greatest job of all time was when I worked at the Village Voice back in the day.
Okay.
I worked there during the 1970s. And there was this the thing about the Voice, which was kind of interesting, is it was already what you call alternative journalism in the sense there was the New York Times, and then there was us,
right?
And we were like this guerrilla army in the Viet Cong sense, The Times was a bunch of guys from Princeton and wherever else they could get these kind of well pedigreed individuals, and they were supposedly, and they knew a lot about. The further away from 43rd Street, which is where the New York Times office used to be, the more interesting their reporting was. Mm-hmm. But the closer to 43rd Street, the more kind of corrupt and,
corporate.
Well, it wasn't really corporate in the sense that it was more like compromised. Because the Times even then owned a lot of real estate, so you can. Right. So in any event, we used to be we were up against them, and on local news, which is really a big thing. People don't talk about local news because I think they would kind of punt that. So that left this enormous opening for you, because we were just these.
So what were some of the things that the Village Voice was covering, and then what was the initial reception to the Village Voice? Was it met with disdain, or did people criticize you for not being so-called real journalists? What was the overall reception? I would assume the New York Times wasn't thrilled to have competition.
Well, it wasn't really exactly competition because it was kind of you would read the New York Times to get one side of the story, and then you read the Voice to get the other side of the story. And basically people were like, it was okay. It wasn't like one side against the other the way it is now. I mean, it wasn't immediately an oppositional kind of thing because we realized that, they got stuff right. We got stuff right. You know, we got stuff wrong. They got stuff wrong. But it was fun to beat them because it was like we were the guerrilla army and they were the establishment.
So, it's interesting. We're talking about now we have Donald John Trump in the White House, and it's a very adversarial position right now between the media and the White House. Of course, this is nothing new. Every single president, Democrat or Republican, has left office hating the media.
It's something new.
But
that's
the
when
point.
He starts calling the newspaper people the enemy of the people. That's,
Right.
That's news. That's
Well,
news. That didn't happen before.
Going back to the 70s, of course, with Jimmy Carter, for example. Jimmy Carter came in. He was anti-establishment. A lot of the establishment didn't like him. There's actually strange parallels between Jimmy Carter and Donald Trump in a very abstract kind of way. But he was he leapfrogged the people that the Democratic establishment wanted to see in the White House. He got into the White House, put in his folks. 2 years later, he got some more establishment people in the White House after he realized he was in way over his head. And the New York Times and the Carter administration despised each other, or at least the Carter administration despised the New York Times. So when it comes to the idea of a president loathing media, it goes back to Adams, who wanted an Alien Sedition Act, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to Trump, it does seem to be at a different level. So what's your perspective on that?
About Trump? Well, the thing is that, Pete Hamill, who's a famous journalist, an estimable figure, I assume your audience knows who he is. I saw Pete. He's a buddy of mine. They were honoring him in Park Slope. They have a library there that was built by Andrew Carnegie.
Okay.
So Andrew Carnegie was this, he's the standard rich guy back from the 19th century. So he said the reason why the world is really screwed up more than it really should be is because the fault of the rich people. And I said, how do you get that? So he says, Andrew Carnegie built 1,600 libraries in this country so people could go in and get facts and information and read a book. Like Donald Trump, he's never even been in a library.
Right.
So you got this kind of thing of like this guy who just doesn't care. He doesn't care about what, you could know everything. You could be Albert Einstein. He's not impressed.
Right.
He's not impressed.
Well, as a matter of fact, he might see that as a point of contention, right?
Well, he's an enemy because if you know something he doesn't know, you're an enemy. So the thing is, and for somebody like a guy like Trump, who's like the megalomania of the guy, which comes right out of the society which feeds megalomaniacs.
Right.
But so like. So now they got what they want. They got the ultimate megalomaniac leader, So.
Well, that is an interesting point. Our society has been rewarding bad behavior. And when I say bad behavior, I'm not talking about it like they're listening to Satanist music like Pantera or White
Pantera,
Zombie.
Man?
Nothing. I love
it. Walk.
Absolutely. No, I know. And R.I.P. Vinny, R.I.P. Dimebag. I'll tell you, Phil is the one. Phil Anselmo killed Dimebag. He requested the fans go beat up Dimebag, and then this is Pantera. So you're telling a Pantera fan to beat somebody up? He's like, I'll get my shotgun. I know what to do. Ridiculous. Anyway,
I'm a G.G. Allen fan. Come on,
G.G. G.G. Allen is good in theory, but I never want to hang out with him. I think it's better that
he's dead. So
yes, I know, and I think
that with him anyhow.
Good Lord Almighty, he sounded like a real. What I'm going to say, I don't want to get too crass here. Pain in the neck.
Oh, he was a nightmare, but he existed, and he was.
No, he existed. But when you talk about that, when you talk about megalomania, when you talk about who we have seen, who we have given value to in this country and in this culture, Donald Trump is really a perfect representation of everything that's wrong with the things that we have validated in people for decades now.
Well, it's just that he's such a bad version of what you. This is like this weird experiment in American history, with fascism, that like they've had many different kinds of fascist leaders. Like during the 1930s and 40s, there was a guy named Father Coughlin. You know about him?
No, I don't.
He had 90 million people listen to his radio show.
90 million?
How many people listen to your radio show?
2 million.
So he had 88 more million people.
Well, now I just feel bad. The interview's over. Okay. I can't deal with
this. I'm sorry. Where's my suitcase?
I'm going out to the middle of the ocean and starting a pirate radio.
All right. No, this guy, look him up. Father Coughlin, a very interesting guy.
Okay, awesome. 90 million. Wow, that's amazing.
He was on once a week. He was basically, he was a Catholic priest, which got him some listenership. But he was basically a fascist, kind of American first or beyond that.
Oh, he was a fascist, this man.
He was a fascist. So and a lot of people listened to him. So America's always had this kind of strain.
Right.
So when you get up to, and right now we're dealing with, I think that this goes a lot with the William Cooper idea of like, you can't believe, you have to do your own research. Mm-hmm. So the idea of the autodidact, the person who finds out for himself, he doesn't believe anything he's told.
Right.
I mean, you could be a guy who can barely add 2 and 2 to 4, 2 and 2, and makes 4 on a consistent basis. And if you're confronted with the aforementioned Albert Einstein, mm-hmm. You would go like, well, that's okay. I mean, you seem to know a lot, but I'm not going to believe anything you say.
Right.
So therefore, I'm going to figure it out for myself, Well,
but isn't that a unique American idea where it's like, no, individualism, I'm the one who's going to figure it out. And it's sort of this strange irony that we're living in now.
Individualism is run amok.
Right.
So, but there's no doubt about that.
Well, I mean, I think that's what Trump supporters see themselves as. Of course, if you're outside of the Trump support
they're just
bubble.
A cult.
Right.
So, like, they listen to all the, who in their right mind would listen to this QAnon stuff? I mean, this is one of the, we talked about this before. I think, like, this is just a bridge too far,
Well, of course, QAnon, I actually know Lionel LeBron. It's extremely bizarre that he had to go, or he got to go to the White House and meet with Donald Trump. QAnon, of course, I'm sure our audience all knows. Well, it's a mystery dude named Q, and he's feeding everyone secret information about the inner workings of the government.
Well, the Q thing comes from the Q classification. I might add that William Cooper also was a Q classification.
Really?
Yeah, Q classification.
What does that provide you? Do you get an email or a special mailer?
Well, back in the day when he was in naval intelligence, now this is his story. I'm of the opinion that maybe he cleaned out a few ashtrays and saw some newspapers every here and there.
Right.
But what he basically did was sort through all these different communicators, because he was working for this guy Admiral Cleary, who was the commander of some fleet which dealt with the entire Pacific Rim.
Okay.
So all this intelligence would come in. Most of it was sort of like the weather or something. And and Bill Cooper and the other people who were in his group would sort through it, and they would triage it out for something that people of a higher rate would have to see, people above the Q clearance.
Okay.
So Q clearance is
it's
not even that big. It's not even the top.
I thought it was the biggest.
No, it's not the top. I can't say I'm an expert about this, so I'm not going to say for sure, but I think there's a lot of leeway within the Q clearance about what you really get to see. So, Q is a weird letter. It doesn't come up that much,
Sure.
So it sounds important, more important than it might
absolutely.
be. So, but that's really...
And anytime when you're addressed solely by one letter, you're a very important person. Just ask James Bond.
Yeah, it's James Bond. Well, he only has 3 numbers.
Well, I think that it's Q. Isn't that his number one guy?
That's true. It's M.
Is it M? I don't know. What I'm saying is, if you're known as just one letter, it's bigger than being known as just like Madonna. It's just M.
Madonna, yeah, it's true. Remember they used to have Montevani. Guys with one name are always kind of a little.
Absolutely,
like
they're mysterious. Absolutely.
There's always a little something funny about a guy with only one name. But
so, what is it now with these people? Going back to your years, let's talk about Rolling Stone, those kinds of things. What were some of the stories that you were covering in the 70s, and how would you cover if you were out there? Rolling Stone, I don't know how well it's doing. As a newspaper, I'm not sure.
It was doing pretty well in the 1970s.
It was doing great in the 70s. It was really one of the major mouthpieces specifically for more of the left, and it really was able to espouse ideals that weren't necessarily in the mainstream conversation quite yet.
Well, when you got a huge audience, the baby boomer generation, that takes in like 90 million people, some enormous amount of people.
Right.
So you got this boom audience, of which I'm part of. I was born in 1948.
Okay.
So I'm like right down in the middle in there. So these are the people who are hanging on for dear life right now to remain relevant in the society. Mm-hmm. So, which is good and bad in a lot of ways, but we don't need to get into it. But Rolling Stone and Rolling Stone or The Voice or a lot of these kind of things were basically for that generation. And that generation saw itself as sort of above the law. in a weird, above the culture. They were going to make the culture, and they did for a long, long time.
Right.
Until the invention of technology, and people would go like, most people my age go like, they may have a hard time figuring out which side of the, where their cell phone is upside down or not.
Right.
So like,
yeah, I can relate to them.
So I feel the same way. But the thing is that like, so you got a thing like that. But back in the day, you have to understand that this was the word. This was the thing out that people would listen to, and people like Hunter Thompson and that kind of stuff became huge stars.
Yeah,
and it was a different sense. It was a sensibility that you went out of, but it was for journalists. I mean, it was basically you go out. Here's the area you're gonna cover.
Okay,
we're gonna cover drugs in New York, right? Mm-hmm. So you go out and you say, come back in 6 weeks and come and tell me what you found. So, which is completely different than the 24-hour news cycle they have now. So, and then you'd find people and have to search through all these people to like find the story.
So you had to go do investigative journalism. You had to go to the slums of the Lower East Side and hang out with all the drug users.
It was also like, it was a lot of scene stuff. I did a piece one time, big long piece for The Voice about the corner of 14th Street and 3rd Avenue.
All right, what was going on there?
It was, I published this piece of 10 sleaziest street corners in New York City.
Hey, all right.
It was
places to go.
Back in the 1970s, there were many contenders for this.
Yeah, top 10. I love it. It was like a BuzzFeed list.
Well, it was a BuzzFeed list for 1977, Cool. It was 1977. That's the epicenter for New York City, right? Like, that's the year of Son of Sam. That's the year of the blackout. That's like, all this stuff was happening, So like, and, so you'd go around and like.
Well, why was 14th and 3rd the sleaziest part?
Well, it was all junkies. I mean, like, you can't even imagine people from New York will understand this, but I mean, it was junkies. There weren't even junkies there. There were like people that were selling T's and V's, baby, T's and V's, which was Tuinals and Valiums.
Hey, all right.
They would sell on the street, and you have this kind of like, and there were like these dirty bookstores that were so dirty you couldn't even go into them, Yeah. I mean, and they had like these strange. There was, before they had internet pornography, you had to actually go out to these places.
That's it.
And go, and with the door and the beginning of the pornography. They didn't even show the movie on a screen. It was like they showed the movie onto a mirror that was then reflected back to this white screen. So everything was, flipped.
Very bizarre.
It was bizarre. And it was completely out of focus all the time. But yet people would go. And they put these quarters in there, And it was, there was a lot of those things there. And then there was a lot of cops, and it was kind of beat up bars, and there was old movie theaters because it was before the real estate boom. So they had these ancient old movie theaters, which are now NYU dorms or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So, something like a typical thing that would happen would be if you were a movie fan, you wanted to go see a Pam Grier movie like Coffee or something like that. And, my friend and I, we used to like, because we were movie nuts, we had a certain place that you want to sit in the theater, like in the 8th row, in the middle. This is the optimum spot, right?
Oh, in the middle, all right.
But on 14th Street and 3rd Avenue, you'd be sitting there watching a movie, and, the theaters, half the seats are broken and stuff like that. And then all these bottles come flying out of the balcony, which they used to have at the time, and crashing all around you. And, big, liquor bottles.
Yeah.
Dangerous,
Seems like it.
So the thing that would bother you the most about that was you had to get up from your seat, the seat that you wanted to sit in that was optimum to watch the film, and sit under the overhang of the balcony so you wouldn't get hit in the head. And this was like a huge inconvenience. So
sounds like it.
I mean, but these are the kind of things that you had to worry about on 14th Street and 3rd Avenue in 1976.
So, being a native New Yorker,
yes, I am.
You saw.
I am so humiliated that Donald Trump is from
that's
the
what I
borough
was
of
going to
Queens.
ask.
I used to be able
Donald
to ride
Trump.
my bicycle from my house, which was on the other side of the expressway, for people that know about these things, and to Trump's house, I must have gone by there 15 times.
All right.
Just because it was like a 20-minute ride on my bicycle.
What kind of house are we talking here?
Trump had this house that was, it looked like this faux mansion thing. And the thing that I really remember about it the most was my father, who was a New York City school teacher, a strong union man, and hated Trump's father, who was a union breaker, well-known union breaker, because he built a lot of different buildings in that area, and he was always he would never deal with the unions. He'd break the unions.
Right.
So one time we were driving by Trump's house, and my father stopped the car, and he said, "That's where that Ganoff Trump lives." And Ganoff is a Yiddish word for, thief.
Okay.
So I always remembered that, So when Donald Trump came around, the people in New York who had grown up with Donald Trump.
Right.
We knew what he was like.
Well, that's the most interesting thing. We watch all these documentaries. I was born in 1981, so I am a young man, and I'm standing by that. But if you watch these old interviews...
I envy you, but...
Yeah, right. No, don't. Everyone's going to be half a cyborg by the time I'm done.
And
if I have a son or a daughter, they're going to marry a robot, and then that's going to be a problem.
That's what my kids always tell me, but
I don't know. I'm not too optimistic about the future in a lot of ways, but I'm also optimistic about the future. So hang in there, everyone. Okay, there we go.
Absolutely. I'm very optimistic about the future because
okay.
I really do feel things are going to get better.
So when it comes to Donald Trump, you've known him forever. Even in the early 80s, mid 80s, he was talking about possibly running for president.
Yeah, but nobody took it seriously.
No one ever took it seriously, like the rise of somebody else. But I won't go into that because I hate the analogy. But what was your perspective of Donald Trump growing up and then covering it as a journalist? Do you know folks who covered him? Because obviously
nobody covered him because he wasn't a worthwhile topic.
Well, he was quite famous across the country.
But that was for Page 6. We didn't do that kind of stuff. The idea that a creature of the tabloids, and I love tabloids. I'm talking about the gossip column thing.
Right.
The only thing you hear about Trump was that he married Martha Maples, or he did this.
Marla Maples. Yeah,
remember her? So,
of course.
He did all these things, and he was all completely obsessed about getting his name in a newspaper.
Right.
And it wasn't somebody to take seriously.
Well, now we have the situation. What's the name of the main guy behind the National Enquirer?
David Pecker.
David Pecker. So
the well-named David Pecker.
Well, absolutely. Between Alan Weiner and David Pecker, we're really getting the
Anthony Weiner was a close friend of mine.
Was he really?
He was, yes.
All right, we can talk about that in a second. When it comes to David Pecker, of course, now he was the head of, is the National Enquirer. Apparently, they had an entire safe filled with stories that basically David Pecker and the National Enquirer bought to bury. Very similar to what happened here, or exactly what happened when it comes to Karen McDougal, one of the gals that Donald Trump paid off after he had an affair on Melania. Poor Melania, leave her alone. That's what I say.
I think Melania she's the hope for the nation, man.
She's going to break up with him as soon as he's out of the White House. That's my inside source.
Wouldn't it be great if she leaves him while he's in the White House?
She might as well. I think that his fan base would relate to him better than ever.
Well, when you think about Trump, right? So, people who don't like Trump. I'm not, people like him, but most people don't. At least the ones that we run into.
Oh, a lot of people. It is funny. A lot of folks do.
What is the proper comeuppance for Donald Trump?
No media coverage.
Well, maybe that
would kill him.
Throwing him out, impeaching him will not be bad.
No, that it'll be just another news cycle.
No, he'll just be sitting in Mar-a-Lago talking to all his cohorts, saying how they screwed him, and they're all going to, "You're right, Donna. You're right, Donna. You're a real hero." That will not be bad. I'm trying to think of what is it. Where is the embarrassment level for somebody with no embarrassment level?
I really think it is solely not covering him.
He's the president. You got to cover him.
No, I know, but after he's done, I think if you just leave him alone, of course he'll always be in the public eye. That's just the way it is.
some public humiliation. Where is it? What
can you do?
The person who thinks about that, that's what you should be thinking about.
The only thing you can do, I know
this. Don't run for borough president anymore. So, think about how to publicly humiliate Donald Trump.
Well, there's a lot of people taking care of that. The only thing that I know when it comes to publicly embarrassing Donald Trump, The only thing that he is very sensitive about is his wealth or lack thereof, right? He calls himself a billionaire, all this kind of stuff. Up for debate. We haven't seen the taxes, and a lot of folks think that's quite an inflated number, which would make sense because he inflates a lot of things like that. But when he was doing the Jeff Ross roast, I know Jeff Ross, and the only thing that Jeff and the other folks on the dais couldn't joke about was his wealth. They could joke about him wanting to have sex with Ivanka. That was fine, but they could not joke about him and his wealth. So I think that would be the most embarrassing thing if you opened up the safe and you had your Al Capone, Geraldo Rivera moment, and you realized there is nothing in the bank account. That would be the most embarrassing thing. But going back to the National Enquirer, what are your thoughts on a publication like that? Do you think that was one of the first publications?
I love that publication.
You love that publication, despite the fact it's just full of lies.
Well, I mean, it's only a problem when people believe it. So
that's true.
So back, I used to love to read the National Enquirer. I mean, while I was waiting on the supermarket line.
Sure, Weekly World News was one of my favorite magazines growing up.
It's only a problem when people begin to believe it.
Well, when did they start to believe it?
I don't think they believe it now.
They must. I mean, they elected this guy.
It's just, well, yeah, because the thing is that people are kind of like bereft. I mean, what's the best story? Donald Trump getting elected president is the best story.
It is.
What was the best story in 2008?
Obama.
Barack Obama, first black president of the United States. You gotta go for it. How would you? How could you pass on something like that? That's the thing that's great about this country, which is also the horrible thing about this country, is that you can have two presidents back to back, Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Like you couldn't imagine like two more different kinds of people in a lot of ways.
Right.
But it's the narrative that's the best story. So the story, it's like the facts are boring. Facts have now reached the absolute. Ronald Reagan was the first person that said his facts are a stubborn thing.
Right?
Like how can you get rid of these things?
Yeah.
And, and now we got rid of them. So So how? And I don't really necessarily, as a journalist, I've been a journalist for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, I've never made a penny doing anything else, which I'm very proud of. But the thing is, you got to go with the flow of what people are thinking about. So therefore, if people feel that facts are boring to them and they don't want to know it, then you've got to kind of take that into consideration when you're doing your work.
Well, let's get into Anthony Weiner here in a second, but just finally with that, because I love
transition to Anthony Weiner.
We have to, because I could talk about Anthony Weiner for days.
I like Anthony a lot. But I feel very sorry about what happened.
Well, we'll talk about it, but just lastly, how complicit do you think the media is? Because now we have the situation where CNN and MSNBC, every day it's Trump. Their ratings are I don't think they're doing that great, but he is a great content provider. Donald Trump just came out. He said, without me, news media would lose so much money. They want me in the White House. And I think there is some truth to that. How complicit is media and the role of journalists in getting him elected and normalizing his presidency?
Well, because, I'm not exactly, I couldn't really go to the bank on this, but everybody who's in the sort of know, more in the know than me, tells me that MSNBC will not do any non-Trump content.
Right.
They just won't cover anything else. They just cover
Trump. There's real things happening out there as well.
The thing is, there's other stuff happening. They don't even, why not go after Betsy DeVos, right? She's a real criminal.
Yes. Absolutely.
She is actually, not only is she doing the things she's doing, she's wrecking like future generations.
Absolutely.
She's more of a criminal than Donald Trump. Plus she's the sister of Eric Prince. This is like a nightmare, people.
Right.
Eric Prince is the guy that started Blackwater, for anybody who doesn't know that.
Crazy.
So these are like bad people.
Yeah.
So why would MSNBC, and I'm not saying they never cover this, but why would they spend all that time with those boring talking heads talking about how much they can't stand Trump and all the horrible stuff he does, when they could actually be serving the public by, they got a lot of reporters there. These reporters are not bad reporters. I'm sure they all went to J school and they know what to do. So they should go out there and find out this kind of stuff and break some stories.
That's a great point.
Because to me, I don't watch that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't watch Fox. I don't watch MSNBC. And in fact, I have a thing about MSNBC, which is just a personal thing. But I mean, I feel that they're worse because I agree with most of the stuff they say. So, yeah, but I don't agree with propaganda.
Right.
I'm against propaganda, except when, I enjoy it. It's kind of funny, but I mean, this is supposed to be the news. It's not supposed to be propaganda. So
right.
And the internet thing, when you began to realize that you never once ever had to read anything that you didn't agree with before you started reading it, this was a major sea change in American journalism. Mm-hmm. I mean, where is Walter Cronkite when you really need him? Here's a guy, for better or worse, at least they were trying to go down the middle, and everybody hated the middle.
Right.
People hate the middle.
Well, it used to be, for the longest time in American politics, that the notion that the center holds, that inevitably you play to the center. But I think that theory now is lost. I think now you play to the sides.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, like in this last election, like for instance, you look at the election last night in Florida.
Right.
So you got this kind of situation where the primary systems, which I think really need to be revamped because it rewards the sides.
Absolutely.
So you got two candidates, both of which are like in Florida.
DeSantis and Gillum.
Yeah, these people are totally compromised before they even run.
Well, and of course that's because Florida has a closed primary. So you have to be registered Democrat, you have to be registered Republican in order to vote in the primary. But of course, 38% of the state is independent.
I wish Mr. Gillum very good luck. But the thing is that, the fact that he's a black guy in one of the most racist states in northern Florida, and he's got this FBI thing hanging over his head. I mean, I can't see how he wins.
I don't know what the FBI thing is. What's the FBI thing?
I don't even know about it. I just know it's there, right? I got to find out about it. But I mean, you don't need to know really because you know that they're going to hammer him with it. And so the Trump guy, I mean, yet last night he's on TV using the word monkey already. I mean, this is the discourse that we have to put up with.
It's only going to get worse.
It's only going to.
That's why your optimism is intriguing to me.
Because I think that. This is what you get for being a hippie.
You're one of those.
1960s
I didn't know
hippie.
we had a hippie here.
Well,
this is getting crazy.
No, hippies were good, man. They got a bad reputation. I mean,
Charles Manson didn't do him any favors. That's the big problem.
Not every hippie was Charles Manson. Although Charles Manson was a really pretty good songwriter, actually.
No, I know. I had his first album. It's not horrible.
His first album.
If he would have just listened to the producer,
the Beach Boys recorded his stuff.
I know. He had some potential.
Brian Wilson? He's one of the great geniuses of American pop culture.
You don't got to tell me, man.
So well, I'm not going to argue in favor of Charles Manson.
Well, but musically, if he would have listened to someone, not been a total sociopath.
David Koresh, all he really wanted to do was be a rock and roll star.
Didn't work out for him. Janet Reno had something to say about that.
Yeah, but a lot of these guys, well, we don't need to go into. There's another one of these megalomania things, man.
Yeah, of course.
So, what was your point now? Tell me again.
Well, now I've completely lost it.
See, like what I was saying about the hippies was. They were actually, I mean, the dumb hippie is the kind of like, I mean, you had to neutralize what was really kind of a major political movement.
The hippie movement.
Yeah. I mean, It wasn't just a bunch of stoners. I mean, I like to get stoned as much as anybody else.
Right.
But the thing is that, there was political content in that. So if you can demean it as a bunch of stoners, it was stupid. Right. Like, hey, man, what the hell's happening? Like that kind of thing. And you neutralize it, so and that was completely, that was done. There's that just like COINTELPRO neutralized the Black Panther Party and that kind of stuff like that. These kind of things are just part of, I think, what they call alternative history.
Absolutely.
Which I think it goes back to the conspiracy thing, because the thing about conspiracy, which makes it interesting, is that until it gets co-opted by haters like Alex Jones and the Trump people and all that kind of stuff like that, it's a legitimate inquiry into like the official story of history,
right?
Which is basically told by neoliberal historians and the conservative historians, which basically have. They have their own point of view.
Yeah, they've co-opted the narrative for sure.
They own the narrative. So now if they don't own the narrative, that's good.
Right.
So I'm a favor of that.
Well, I want to talk to you. Well, let's wrap it up with that question about the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and how the left is now embracing them as if they're the saviors of this country. But before that, Anthony Weiner. What is wrong with Anthony Weiner? Can I just ask you, why is this man, he didn't even have sex with anyone. This is the problem. There's a great documentary. You got to watch Weiner.
I've seen it. I thought it was great.
Oh, my, it was so good.
It was like, I know the guy very well. I did 2 stories with him. I wrote about him on 2 different occasions in New York Magazine. I spent a lot of time with him.
All right, what were your thoughts?
I really enjoy him as a person.
Okay.
He's as smart as a whip. He's got a great sense of humor. I ate dinner with him and Huma a few times,
Yeah.
And it's obvious, everybody's wondering, like, why Huma would ever marry a guy like that, right? This is like, why would you do that? Why would you marry a guy who's supposed to be the pervert? But you could tell that she really dug him, because he would tell these jokes, and she would, even late into the game, he'd be telling these jokes, and she would laugh, and they were funny too. Yeah. So she got a kick out of him, But he's got, look, I'm not an expert on his psychological setup, but for some reason he had this self-destructive urge, which was too bad because he really was one of the better congressmen.
He really was, of course.
He was. He was the only guy that was hanging out was holding out for single payer. He was the only guy who did a lot of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So like, I'm not saying that he was. I mean, if I was a real moron conspiracy theorist kind of guy, I would assume that they brought him down. They brought Anthony Weiner down.
Right.
I mean, he did it to himself, obviously, but.
Well, what were the stories that you were working on about Mr. Weiner?
Well, Weiner, it was mostly around the mayoral election.
Because he had a chance. For those that don't know, he was probably going to be the next mayor of New York. Had he not gone back, he had the apology tour. And then this Sidney Leathers character rolls out of nowhere.
Sidney Leathers is really a creature, man.
It's interesting. She made a lot of. I don't even know if she made a lot of money off of.
Is that really
Anthony
her name?
Weiner.
I mean,
I'm not sure. I don't think that's. No, I'm sure that's not really her name. I think that's her performance
I
art
hope
name.
that's really her name, but because it would just be funnier that way. But the thing about Anthony is like Breslin used to say, Jimmy Breslin.
Yeah.
People out there familiar with Jimmy Breslin?
Of course. Yes, he's on the tip of everyone's tongue.
Not really, but he was at one time. He was the #1 journalist in New York City.
Yeah.
So, he said, "Talent don't care who it belongs to." Now, Anthony Weiner was a talented politician, but he wasn't the guy to carry that talent because he had this weird defect, But
did you feel like when you were interviewing with him, was there any signs? Did you interview him after the first scandal?
I interviewed him before and after.
Okay, so was there a change in his demeanor or his overall vibe?
That's a good question. I would say not as much as you might imagine.
Yeah.
Because he was him. He was him. He realized that he had to do this kind of thing. He had to go around and apologize and all this kind of stuff like that. But whether he clearly hadn't thought this all the way through because he wouldn't have done it again,
right.
And allowed himself to get caught again, that kind of moves him into the tragedy department.
Right.
But I mean, the thing about Weiner, which was kind of fun, is like, he just didn't have that much respect for, he had the right kind of respect for his office. He understood that it was important, but he also was a New York guy. His mother was a school teacher. He was a very recognizable person as somebody from New York. Like when you look at a guy like Bill de Blasio, to me, he doesn't seem like a New Yorker. So I don't want him for mayor, even if, I just don't want him.
Yeah, he's a Red Sox fan. I'm really actually surprised that wasn't a bigger deal in the campaign.
I mean, I saw him on the street. He lives right near where he used to live. On the next block from where I live, right?
Yeah.
So I see him on the street every once in a while, and then I don't like him. So I drove by him the other day. I see him. He's a gawky guy. Looks like, his real name is Wilhelm, not de Blasio.
Oh my goodness!
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that. I don't like him even more now.
Yeah. So I mean, the name somebody with the name Wilhelm is not going to be elected in New York City. But
he was twice.
Somebody named de Blasio might get reaselected.
Right. So, I see. It's
like
Trump and Trump. Yeah, you change it up.
Yeah. So like the guy is like, I mean, to me, Anthony Weiner was a real New Yorker. So as a real New Yorker, I give him points that maybe he doesn't deserve for that. But right. That's
well,
right.
I mean, I guess now, obviously, the political career is done. He'll be in prison for the next, I think, like 18 months or so, because he's already served a minute.
I told Anthony, I said, Anthony, man, you don't need to run for mayor. You need to go work for Mother Teresa for about 2 years and then come back.
Right, what did he say?
Just didn't hear it. He didn't hear that he needed to more. You don't have to go work for Mother Teresa, but you needed more penitence before you just throw yourself back into the fray. You needed more. And he didn't think that way.
Interesting. And so, I mean, obviously now his career is over. You should definitely do an interview with him if you get the chance when he's out.
Maybe I will go out to lunch with him.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, maybe not in public. I don't know, but
he's an interesting guy, though. No, most people feel that way about him, though. I mean, I'm not the only one.
No, absolutely. And if you get a chance to watch that documentary, it's been out for a little while now, but you get to see him campaign. You get to see him flip a crowd. The crowd was very hostile. I think he was in Long Island or something like that.
He's great at it.
Yeah, really talented. All right, to wrap it all up, let's talk about the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. These are the institutions, going back to corporate media, going back to talking about MSNBC. Michael Hayden is always on. He's the former head of the NSA, and they are treating him like he is the last bastion, the savior of this country. And these are the people who were in charge of a completely unconstitutional, completely nefarious program that should have never existed. But what are your thoughts as a former hippie/journalist?
How about journalist/former hippie?
Journalist/former hippie works. Hippie, okay.
Okay, I should have never admitted that I was a hippie.
No, it's fine. I would have been a hippie too.
Any event. So you got to go back to September. I don't mean to be historical, but go back to September 18th, 1947, the day that Harry Truman signed the National Security Act, which created the CIA, the NSA, and all those things you were just mentioning. So. And these guys were always the bad guys. Mm-hmm. They were the ones that were going to get the FBI and all those kind of guys were the bad guys. If you want to go talk about hippies, they were the bad guys.
Right.
The idea that things have flipped, that now you'll see Rachel Maddow or somebody like that defending the FBI because Trump is against it, is to me like, I mean, what more do you need to know about the kind of lack of historical integrity that most of the propagandists that are out there now.
Right.
I mean, what's wrong with understanding a little bit of history about what's going on? I mean, James Comey, to me, he is not exactly what you call a hero, man.
No.
He interfered with the election. He did.
Absolutely.
He did on both sides. So where is his sense of decorum? Why should he be a hero?
Right.
I mean, I like that he's tall. He's 6'8", and like he's an Irish guy and all that kind of stuff. That's fine.
Sure. we gotta like the tall guys.
Like, that's good. But these guys should be seen for really what they are. And the NSA is, regardless of you think that Trump is against them, if Trump's against them, that's probably, I'm on Trump's side. So, but nobody can be on Trump's side, so you got to be against them.
Right.
So you got to be for the NSA. How can you possibly be for these people? So, I understand your point, and I think you're right.
Well, that's the most difficult thing about all of this. Just because, I mean, my girlfriend wrote a piece for the New York Post talking about Michael Cohen has a GoFundMe. And it's his GoFundMe for his legal troubles. Of course, Lanny Davis is his lawyer. This man's a multimillionaire. Michael Cohen is $20 million. And the idea that anti-Trumpers are now giving money to the former Trump fixer, former Trump lawyer, because now he's against Trump, it makes my head explode.
The only reason why he got that job is he has the same name as Roy Cohn.
Exactly. So, a couple of extra letters in there, or one, I guess, but.
I mean, Roy Cohn is like, I would suggest people see a movie. It's not very well seen very much anymore. It's a movie called Citizen Cone.
Okay.
With James Woods, if people remember him playing Roy Cohn.
James Woods has jumped the shark now. I love it.
Well, he's pretty fantastic as Roy Cohn.
I didn't realize he played Roy. That's Roy hilarious.
Cohn. You can get this movie on YouTube or something like that, maybe, or just buy it from Amazon, which is also I mean, why isn't Jeff Bezos the enemy of the people?
Right. Absolutely.
What's wrong with that?
No, I mean, he's getting all buff. He shaved his head. He looks like a supervillain. But the meat's cheaper now at Whole Foods. So thank God. And his employees at Amazon still don't get bathroom breaks, and inevitably they're just going to be out of a job. as automation continues to take over the country.
Well, see, that's why you got to think past that and think about the brighter future.
That's what I'm going to do. I do it every day. I love the future.
When you get up in the morning, you just think about the brighter future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, Mark Jacobson, check out this book, Pale Horse Rider, William Cooper, The Rise of Conspiracy and the Fall of Trust in America. Also, if you get a chance, listen to our Patreon interview Henry and I did with Mr. Jacobson. I think you'll really enjoy it. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for being here, man.
Can I plug one more thing?
Yes, of course.
As I said before, since I never even imagined myself having an Instagram account, I have one, and I would like you to follow it. It's called Pale Horse Rider Book.
Pale Horse Rider Book on Instagram. Follow that, and follow me at Ben Kissel 1. Also, September 6th, The Strand, 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Go check out Mark and speak with him. And then are you going to sign the books?
I'll sign books. I'll be speaking with a guy named Danny Goldberg, who is a brilliant fellow. Used to be the manager of Kurt Cobain.
Really?
Which is that's who gets the chance to be Kurt Cobain's manager.
Very cool, man. All right. Well, hopefully, if I'm in town, and I should be, I will be there as well. So I hope to see you all there.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Thank you all so much. Interesting guy, Mark Jacobson, Marcus. I think you're really going to like him. He'll probably call in. He was on our Patreon for Henry and I interviewed him for the last podcast on the Left Patreon, all about the book. We talked more about the book on that. So if you get a chance and you have given to our Patreon, go check that out. Please do. All right, everyone. Well, we will be back next week covering the most important news of the week, Alex Jones, as always. All right, everyone. Hail yourselves.